Play the forbidden note.
Hello all, this video needs no introduction other than in this video we'll be reviewing Arc 2 of The Owl and the Frog, a fanfiction written by Champion El Cid that crosses over both Amphibia and the Owl House. If you haven't already, I highly suggest you watch part 1. A short recap though, Luce got expelled from her old school and begins to attend St. James where she meets Anne, Sasha and Marcy. She befriends them, develops a crush on Anne, impulsively kisses her, regrets it, and Anne stops being friends with her, all because of Sasha's pressuring them both. And now they're all trapped in Amphibia. Up to speed? Good. Without further ado, let us continue. The arc begins with Luce attempting to survive in Amphibia. She has lost track of how long she has been in there, skill issue. She did though manage to construct some form of a shelter, but it was crudely made and only managed to keep out heat and weather. Furthermore, food was becoming a problem as was water, since the only time she ever drank was dirty swamp water, and that the mud was particularly thick though, she only really found it a minor nuisance. She didn't stray too far from a shelter in the hopes that rescue would come or that she would be returned to Earth somehow. She hoped that Anne, Sasha or Marcy were in this world of her, though that was dampened by the fact that just mere minutes prior before being transported, Anne straight up said that she didn't want to be friends, and so her best bet was either Sasha or Marcy. Though she did have music, videos and video games downloaded onto her phone, though it would only be a matter of time until it ran out of charge and thus would need to find an alternative power source. She then finds a large stick to use as a makeshift weapon before running into a large moth. Attempting to back away, Luce accidentally alerts it to her location before he gives chase. Luce tries to put up a fight, but the moth deploys some powder that causes Luce to fall asleep despite her attempts to flee. We then jump to a trio of new characters, a newt named Amara, a toad named Gustav and a frog named Lily. The trio was searching for a plant at the request of their teacher, with Amara acting like a snobby smartass towards Gustav, who retorts that he doesn't have a private library like Amara. Lily does manage to break up the squabble between the two, though Gustav referred to Amara as Little Miss Perfect. I see what you did there. Gustav suggested they split up, but Amara disagrees, stating that the wilderness is too dangerous and they don't know what could be lurking out there. Lily asks, like that creature, and the amphibians discover none other than Luce Noseda, having passed out. Speculating what she could be, the amphibians agreed to restrain her before taking her to their teacher, but in the midst of doing so, Luce begins to wake up. A few hours later, Luce finds herself in some room and yelps in surprise. Lily attempts to run out, but Luce didn't follow. Instead, she was surprised that this house is just like something from Earth. Lily asks Luce if she was going to eat her, to which Luce assures her that she won't and that there isn't really much of anything that is edible here. Surprised that she can talk, Lily introduces herself, as does Luce. Later, Gustav and Amara comes in. Gustav introduces himself and Amara, though Amara asks that he not reveal where they are just in case that she has some ulterior motive. Luce then has to once again assure that she doesn't intend on eating them, just as her stomach rumbles, leading her to ask if they have anything for her to eat, given that she hasn't eaten anything in days. Lily offers some bugs, though Luce asks if they have anything other than bugs. Gustav goes out to the kitchen and fetches some vegetables and gives them to Luce, who then devours it. Lily is pretty hyped that they found not just a new creature, but that creature is intelligent and can speak. Amara, however, is sus and does not believe Luce when she says that she came from another world. Luce never elaborates as to exactly how, given how she just met those people. Lily thankfully sticks up for Luce and speculates on how someone could have used a spell to take her here, much to Amara's doubt. Luce is shocked and amazed to find out that not only magic exists, but they're also learning it. Gustav suggests that they go to their teacher, only for their teacher to come downstairs as she overheard what was going on. The chapter then ends with the amphibians explaining where they found Luce and the teacher introducing herself as Udila, the Witch of the Wilds. This was a great start to Arc 2. The amphibians are set up really well, the interactions with Luce are well written, and overall the chapter was a nice read. Now I want you to all take a look at these characters and their names. Notably, look at Udila and Lily and focus on Gustav and Udila's names. I'll give you all a hint. Mae Whitman, Tati Gabriel, Isaac Ryan Brown, Wendy Malick. If you haven't caught on, then I'll just tell you straight up. Udila, Amara, Lily and Gustav are actually the story's counterparts to Edel and Clawthorne, Amity Blight, Willow Park and Augustus Porter respectively. With that in mind, the characters fit their canon personalities really nicely, and overall this chapter gets a perfect score of 10 out of 10. The chapter starts with Udila inspecting Luz, stating that while she has heard of humans before and even saw a photo of one, she hasn't seen one in the flesh until now. Amara was curious as to where she saw a picture of a human, to which Udila said that the Royal Library of Newtopia has a lot of stuff that she doesn't know about. Asking if Luz came from another world, Luz says that she does, but claims yet again to be unsure how she got here. Amara then once again implies that Luz has some ulterior motive, though Lily comes and defends Luz, only for Amara to pull an amphibian racism and says, "No wonder frogs are so plebeian, like Jesus Christ, chill." The squabble is broken up by Udila, who speculates on what spell could have brought Luz here, or that she could have been cursed. Asking if anyone else came with her, Luz answers that 3 others came and shows the Polaroid photo of her with Anne, Sasha and Marcy. She elaborates on who they are, though gets bummed out when Anne is brought up and thus doesn't want to talk about her. Some small chatter later and Udila offers to help Luz get home in exchange for errands. We then cut to Luz and Udila heading out towards a toad outpost. Udila tells Luz that not only she must learn about the creatures in Amphibia, but that she also must learn about the politics, joking if it's not the creatures that kill you, it'd be the politics. You know, Udila, as someone who regularly engages with the political site of Twitter and sees some of the most mind-meltingly awful takes and plain bullshit from Hitlerites to tankies to just complete idiots, I can't say I disagree. Afterwards, she gives a rundown of the social caste system in Amphibia. When asked about Luz, there is a specific place that salamanders live, Udila explains there isn't really one, as salamanders are rare and thus exactly aren't concentrated on any particular area. The reason for rarity is something that Udila refuses to elaborate on. Mentioning that newts often think they're better than others, Lily mentions Amara as an example, to which Udila explains why that may be the case. Given her parents are upper-class newts, they likely instilled this bigoted worldview into her and thus, like her parents, sees amphibians other than newts as lesser beings. Despite her previous newt students not being able to change her worldview, she hopes that Amara may be different. Frogs, she states, have a good connection to the earth as a result of being farmers. Even her previous student was not only a frog that was the daughter of a baker from Wartwood, but she was also a brilliant student and she had the perfect mindset for learning magic. Wonder who that could be. Lastly, she elaborates on toads and refers to them as thugs who run an extortion racket against other towns. She then goes on to elaborate that the taxes, quote unquote, are the toads saying, if you don't pay us then we'll destroy your town, hence the extortion part. She then explains how she steals the toads' taxes and thus uses the money to help impoverished areas. She then devises a plan with Luz and Lily, use Luz to scare the toads and thus distract them whilst Udila and Lily steal the taxes. Fast forward a while later and the trio arrive at the toad encampment with 2 toads discussing their haul, not noticing Udila. Luz and Lily were hiding behind a bush and watching them. The plan is set into motion when Lily runs towards them and pretends to be a terrified frog that claims to have spotted a monster. Initially confident that they can take it on, the toads immediately shit bricks and run for the hills when they spot the monster, that monster being none other than Luz. They declare victory and prepare to take the sack of money, only for the victory to be short-lived as another toad, Bog, leaps out and slices Udila's hand off. He then grabbed Udila, waffled on about how Grime is going to enjoy having a severed head as a trophy, but then Udila retorts how exactly can Crime verify that this is indeed her, not just some random salamander that was caught in the crossfire. Just then, Luz sneaks up on Braddock and uses Udila's staff to knock him out before the trio make a run for it, but not before grabbing what they can, and all disheartened that they couldn't get the whole lot though. Whilst Udila jokes about the situation, Luz is not just terrified that Udila got a hand cut off, but bewildered by the fact that she isn't batting an eye in the slightest. Right before Udila could explain, however, the red toad catches up to them alongside the 2 other ones that previously fled, and thus Udila prepares to fight. Despite Luz's protest, Udila orders her and Lily to flee before either of them get hurt. Using an ice spell to freeze the green toad, Udila dodges club attacks from the blue toad and even blocks one using her staff. Using a strength spell, Udila beat up the blue toad until there were just a crumpled sap on the ground, leaving just the red toad. And Udila deals with him via turning him into a grasshopper and leaving him to be devoured. Damn, nice one. Regrouping with Lily and Luz, Udila jokes about how her age must have let him get the drop on her, only for Luz to still scream about the fact that her hand was missing. This annoys Udila, even asking if Luz has salamanders on Earth. Luz says they do, to which Udila asks why Luz is yelling then in the first place. Udila then explains that while she can regenerate limbs, any mortal injuries are most likely unrecoverable. Some small chit-chatter later and Udila explains how magic works, including the Gemini staff. In exchange for helping her with anything, Udila offers to help Luz return to Earth. Expecting a handshake, she instead gets hugged by Luz. A few hours later, Luz prepares to turn in for the night. Lily walks into the basement and to see how Luz is settling into her new room, and well, considering that Luz had to sleep on mod for a few days and she had to keep one eye open for any predators, it shouldn't come across as a surprise that she likes this a lot more. Lily asks Luce if she could elaborate on the friend that made her upset, but Luce once again says she doesn't want to talk about it. Some chatter later, and Luce turns in for the night. Back upstairs, Udila is panicking as she suspects that the cause of Luce's arrival was that one of her friends has possession of the Calamity box, or at the very least a good chance that this was the case. To make matters worse, this must mean that the Calamity box must have ended up on Amphibia should her speculation be correct. In the meantime, she'd have to keep an eye on Luce. We then have a flashback to roughly 1019 CE, about 1,000 years prior. Here we have Life and a salamander named Hexsquad fighting over the Calamity box. Believing that Life was lying about the box and its capabilities, Hexsquad managed to grab the box from Life after trapping her once she held it. She was in disbelief at the vision she saw, the moon crashing into Amphibia. Don't ask how it survives the Roche limit, that's something Amphibia writers need to answer. This was shocking for Hexsquad, as she is one of the smartest in Amphibia and thus would have predicted some form of prophecy. She frees Life before Life gives her a hug. Life asks if she or anyone else has some form of contingency plan, to which Hexsquad says she doesn't know, her best bet may be to contact the Alms. Hexsquad also reveals that, prior to the box's creation, Amphibian society was divided as a result of newts, toads, salamanders and frogs fighting over resources. When the box was created, it made that redundant, as they could just simply invade and annex other worlds for resources. So to solve the problem in society, just go full Combine or Viltrumite or RDA, that definitely works. To properly enact this, King Aldrich opened up Utopia to all species, telling them, why commit discrimination to each other when we could just commit colonialism to everyone else? But it worked, and so Amphibia was now unified. After the retelling, Hexsquad and Life visited the Alms, visited Earth to place the box there before returning to Amphibia on the outskirts of Wartwood. Life decides to retire to Wartwood and become a farmer, and Hexsquad decides to dedicate her life to studying magic. Hexsquad revealed to Life that she and Andreas were going to be married once Earth was annexed. What's more is that Hexsquad pretended to be an explorer, lying to everyone including Life because she really didn't have it in her to pillage and subjugate the population. At first she was bent on colonizing Earth, especially after meeting that vile human, laughing in his face and telling him that Earth will be annexed effortlessly. Yet she changed her mind after seeing how other people are not as vile as him. Wonder who that could be. Hexsquad then speculates if Amphibia would remain unified even after the box is absent. The chapter ends with the two making one last farewell before the two never saw each other again. This chapter was long, yet amazing. First off, Udila was the highlight of this chapter. Unlike Ida, whose rebellion really only extended as far as refusing to join a coven and dodging authorities, not really doing much to fight against the Emperor's Coven in Belos until around the latter half of Season 2, though the fight against Lilith in Agony of a Witcher may counts, and maybe to an extent the convention episode. Udila actively steals from the Toads, interrupts their operations, and even distributes the money towards those who need it. The chemistry between Luce and the Amphibians, much like the last chapter, was well written and matched their canon counterparts extremely well. It should be noted, however, that the flashback portion was added after the core in the King aired, so this wasn't originally in the chapter, but now it is. With that being said, this chapter gets another perfect score of 10 out of 10. The chapter starts off with Luce waking up and donning her school uniform, which has become slightly tattered. Heading upstairs, she wishes everyone good morning. We're all happy to see her, except Amara, who says, fine until you showed up. Bitch, I'm gonna fucking... She tells Luce that she was hoping that she'd be sent back to Earth by now, but alas, Udila said she'd be staying for the time being. Luce tries to lighten up things by saying she hoped the same, but on the bright side she'll be learning magic. Much to Amara's dismay, I'm gonna fucking crush her skull. As soon as a tired Udila walked in, Amara demanded to know if Luce was telling the truth. Udila's response can be summed up as, yeah, probably. And despite Amara's protest, her decision was final. Udila then hands Luce some breakfast, and that breakfast consists of smashed bugs. That sounds... appetizing. Luce kindly declines and asks if they have any produce such as potatoes, carrots or tomatoes, the latter immediately catching everyone's attention, Amara even remarking how she at least has some upper class tastes, quote unquote. The amphibians recall how their attempts at gathering tomatoes ended up extremely challenging, leaving Luce bewildered. She explains that on Earth tomatoes were harvested much simpler, much to the surprise of amphibians. After Udila returned to give Luce the carrots and potatoes, Luce elaborated that while some humans eat bugs, not all of them do compared to amphibians. When asked how she knows what amphibians eat despite not being from Amphibia, Luce explains that amphibians do exist on Earth, they're just not sapiens and much smaller. Some chitter chatter later, and the amphibians plus Luce are tasked by Udila to deliver the potions around town, Tadpole Pond. Amara warns that the populace would see Luce as a monster and thus be wary of her. As soon as they stepped out of the house, Amara's warning ends up being true as a crowd gathered around Luce and began pointing and whispering. One person even questioned if Luce was actually going to eat them despite her reassurance, and an elderly frog suggesting that they keep their distance. After gesturing to the group to step out of town for a bit, Amara tells Luce that because the town doesn't like her, she has to sit this one out. Despite Luce's protest, Amara hits Luce with a
end of discussion.
Before Luce hands her the bag, leading Luce to just sit on a rock whilst the others go off to finish the deliveries. Gustav questions if Amara was too harsh, to which Amara defends herself by saying that this method works. This leads to another squabble between Lily and Amara, so I won't go over that. As Luce is feeling salty that Amara said that crap to her, an old frog, the same one that told the other amphibians to back away from Luce, expresses his sympathies before asking if Luce would like to help him retrieve tomatoes. Think about what the amphibian said about how difficult gathering tomatoes are. Luce brushes it off and accepts his offer. Later, the amphibian quartet, having finished their deliveries, prepares to return home, but not before going to pick up Luce. However, once they arrive, they find Luce is absent. Amara speculates that she may have wandered off before another frog tells the group that she went off with Gaspar, the frog from earlier, to gather tomatoes. Immediately, Lilith asks that Amara and Gustav tell Udila and ask her for backup. Gustav is understandably hesitant, while Amara questions why she cares about Luce so much. Lily snaps back, stating how Luce is her friend, how she's much nicer to her than Amara ever has been, and asks that Amara take note, leaving Amara speechless. Go tell him. Meanwhile, Gaspar leads Luce towards a tomato monster, which looks practically the same as Cannon. They devise a plan in which Luce distracts the monster whilst Gaspar gathers the tomatoes. Yeah, this seems legit. Luce engages the monster, but using one of its vines, it grabs Luce and threatens to eat her. Luce cries out to Gaspar for help, but surprise surprise, Luce has been duped. Gaspar tells her that she can die knowing it's for a worthy cause, making him a rich son of a bitch, just as Gustav and Lily arrive to help Luce, knocking into Gaspar and causing him to drop his tomatoes. Whilst trying to regather them, he accidentally got in range within the tomato monster, which grabbed him, and then he was game ended via being devoured with a quote sickening crunch. Meanwhile, it became a tug of war between Gustav, Lily, and the tomato monster. After Luce apologized for wandering off, Udila comes in and swiftly dispatches the tomato monster. After Luce explains what happened, Udila then got the idea to make a profit off the tomatoes, and sure enough, later that day, Udila sells her entire stock. Chit-chatter later, and Udila tells Luce that she'll have to go do some digging about her friend's whereabouts, alongside finding a way to get Luce home. Shortly thereafter, she thanks Amara for letting her know about Luce's predicament. Amara awkwardly tries to play it off, but then struggles to answer when Udila asks what was that all about. She then thought back to what her parents told her. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Light, who you can probably guess who their counterparts are, tell her that newts are at the top of the social caste, much better than toads and frogs, calling them both lesser species, and that not only is her birthright to be better than two other students, but that she will prove that newts are indeed better. The chapter then ends with Amara questioning if what her parents said regarding other species is really true. Despite this chapter being filler, I actually really enjoyed it. If you haven't noticed, this episode is actually kind of based off the second episode of the Owl House's first season, titled Witches Before Wizard, with more or less similar beats. Luce is tasked to deliver potions, she's asked by an old dude to do something seemingly important. Ida/Udila finds out, Luce finds out it's a scam, Ida/Udila comes to rescue her, with the perpetrator getting eaten, albeit in this case it's a plant monster eating the con artist instead of Udila, or Ida rather. Lily hitting Amara with that armor piercing question, and that eventually causing Amara to not only assist in helping out Luce, but actually question the belief that her parents indoctrinated her with, was executed really well, and is definitely the highlight of this episode. I do wish Amara was given some action, but doesn't really take away too much. Overall, a score of 9 out of 10. The chapter starts off with Udila showing off her new hand to Luce, reassuring her that there is no need to be worried about her losing a limb, to which Luce admits that she feels a little jealous. A few weeks pass, and now it's time for Luce, Amara, Gustav and Lily to learn how to make potions. To start with, a basic sleeping potion, which is extremely forgiving if you don't get it right. We then cut to the group scavenging for the required flowers. Amara, of course, brags because why wouldn't she? Meanwhile, upon finding some blue orchid, Luce suggests that Lily give it to a male frog she might be interested in. After Lily responds with that it depends on her father's approval, Luce is shocked to learn that arranged marriages also exist on Amphibia. Whilst Lily assures Luce that her father isn't really like that kind of person, the same potentially cannot be said for Amara's parents, as they'd likely want Amara to be affiliated with someone equally or more wealthy than them in order to increase their power or influence. Regardless, once the group found enough, they went back to actually work on the potion. Come nighttime, Luce drinks it, and it actually works. Cue a time skip of a few weeks with Udila teaching the gang about more potions and stuff, and now we have Udila teaching them about elixirs. Luce asks what's the difference, to which Amara, the smartass, mocks Luce for not understanding. Udila then goes, "Let's see you have a crack at it," and she does surprisingly well. Amara then takes this as another opportunity to insult Luce. Shut your bitch ass up! Before Udila diffuses the situation by explaining that she'll be teaching them how to brew an elixir of light. Whilst Udila does have a handful of ingredients already in storage, the rest of them require that the quartet go out and forage for them, and that the elixir itself needs to simmer overnight. Amara once again takes this as an opportunity to stroke her ego and fling shit at everyone. Oh my god, But Udila subtly takes a jab at Amara's superiority complex, stating that people who know a lot should spread their knowledge to other people and thus bring them to their knowledge of expertise. Amara hesitates and she knows this will mean that she'll have no reason to shit talk others, but accepts begrudgingly, stating that it'll work in theory, quote unquote. Yeah, what work in theory is, okay, I need to stop. Udila then responds that they should actually start doing it then. The group then gets to work on making the elixir. Amara and Gustav went off to Udila's potion storage, whilst Luce and Lily checked off which ingredients would be needed to be gathered from the wild. Once that was done, the quartet went off to forage for the required ingredients. After a few hours of gathering the ingredients, they arrived back at Udila's house as the sun was beginning to set. Udila told them to turn in for the night, it was getting late and the elixir would take several hours. The next day, the group actually got to work on preparing the elixir of light. Unfortunately, not only was Amara the one to be actually successful, but she wastes no time in being a complete sack of shit towards everyone else and making me want— okay, yeah, it's getting old now. Udila reviews each of the elixirs and, whilst congratulating Amara for being successful before Amara subsequently leaves to get Harriet's Bane from a cave, she reassures the rest that Amara likely had a head start and them being unsuccessful is not necessarily telling of their skill level, even telling Luce that the fact she could brew potions correctly despite being an outsider is something to be proud of. Luce drinks the elixir and descends down towards the basement, making sure to keep all the lights off. Despite the elixir tasting like honey, it had no effect and thus couldn't see in the dark. Then, she trips over her makeshift mattress and falls over. In frustration, she wished that she had some sort of light source or at least could create one. Then, lo and behold, she summons a light sphere. The group came downstairs in shock, much more so when Luce began repeating it. Gustav notes that it's similar to how Udila does magic, to which Udila tells him that it's true, though the magic could have just come from the elixir and that she needs to take a sample to do some analysis. Gustav proposes to Udila that the reason Luce could do magic was due to Luce having bonded with a gem that grants her magic in her world. Udila says that it's possible, but the issue remains that nobody knows how Luce got transported here. After Luce tells Udila that she still has 12 bottles of the elixir left, we cut to the evening where Luce and Udila have a short chat. Luce is disappointed that the elixir wore off, but is excited to learn more and more and wishes Udila good night. We then cut to 500 years ago, that being the 17th century, to when Udila was younger and had successfully created an elixir much to the approval of her mother and grandmother. Udila then asks her grandmother, named Shirasaid, if she really worked with King Andreas. Shirasaid hesitates, but does vaguely tell Udila that she used it a long time ago and refuses to elaborate further, saying how things are, quote, best left in the past. Gee, what are you hiding there? Shirasaid then goes on to state that she did have a few friends there, that being a toad and a frog, but unfortunately, by virtue of salamanders having a long lifespan, she outlived both of them. She adds that it comes with a long lifespan, having outlived several friends. Some chatter later, we cut to 200 years ago in the 19th century. Udila, now 200 years old, speaks of an 800-year-old Andreas and grieves over the loss of her parents and now that she's alone. Andreas comforts Udila, with Udila upset that if she had used her magic then she could have saved him from the herons. Some more chatter later and the chapter ends with Andreas proposing to Decor that Udila build a new Calamity box. This chapter is brilliant. Right off the bat, since it's quite prevalent here, Amara is incredibly unlikable. She's egotistical, snobby, as well as being an outright racist towards the rest of the group, and the story is showing us that this is not a good thing, while sprinkling some hints as to where she learned this behaviour from. The dialogue is great, grammar's spot on. I really like how, like in the Owl House, Luce's first spell is a light spell, though I do wish Amara stuck around to see her reaction. The flashback section was okay, but still, this chapter gets an 8 out of 10. The mid-arc / mid-season / mid-whatever finale. Let's get to it. The chapter starts off with Udila and her students making their way through the forest, in particular the deeper sections to show her what it has to offer, since a lot of them are vastly different compared to the ones near the house. Lily notices Luce's sketching the plants they've come across. Luce says that she hopes to document everything she learnt here and that it will also be a good way to practice her art. Amara forcefully takes a look at it and surprisingly has nothing but good things to say about it, which surprises the entire group, and Amara says that she, since she hails from Utopia, has an appreciation for art. Udila then points to a bush that has berries used for both pies and curses. When asked when they're going to learn about curses, Udila says that curses are extremely dangerous. Their dark magic are not to be used for petty reasons and once applied are permanent until the one who applied it removes it. After they chatter, the group settled down to have some food, but was interrupted by cicadas?
Cicadas.
Strangely, the
Cicadas.
ignored them, much to the group's confusion. As it turns out,
Cicadas.
fleeing from herons, which absolutely terrify the amphibians since herons are their natural predator. Udila tells her students that they must stay quiet and hidden as the herons will leave if they can't find food. Right on cue, the herons poke their beak through the tree canopy and thus the group flees in terror. Udila asks that the students get out of there while she handles it herself. Luce then downs a strength potion and holds the heron back by the beak with her eyes flashing purple momentarily. The amphibians manage to poke the heron with sticks, specifically in its eyes. Afterwards, the Heron leaves and heads in the direction of where Udila is. Despite Amara's reassurance, Luz protests that they cannot leave Udila there, but before much else was said, Udila arrived, albeit looking really scratched up. She asks what they're doing here, to which Luz says they had to fight off a Heron, with Gustav telling them that they gotta get going. Udila, however, protests, and despite the group's pleas, she says they should just leave her here and not turn back before Udila begins to transform. After a rather vivid transformation sequence, Udila transforms into a heron herself before she attacks the other herons. The group make their way back to Udila's house as though they are shit scared about what happened to their mentor. Not helping is that she hasn't returned by the time night fell. Gustav proposes that they light a fire and watch for when Udila returns, with Amara suggesting they watch in rotation. Later, Amara asks why Lily saved her, considering Amara was an arsehole to Lily. Lily replies that she doesn't want Amara dead regardless, and that Amara may have done the same to Lily. Amara, however, admits that she may have left Lily for dead due to the social Darwinism that her parents instilled in her. After Lily explains that she needs to break free from her parents' indoctrination, we cut to Amara on the night watch, who's glad to see that Udila returned. Luz opened the door and, upon seeing Udila, immediately rushed to hug her. Given that she needs time to recover, however, Udila cancels tomorrow's lesson before she gives a rundown of how curses work. Essentially, she needs an elixir to keep it at bay, and that the curse cannot be removed unless it's done so by the caster. After some more stuff happens, we cut to a flashback that takes place 100 years prior in 1919. Udila is with a bunch of scientists trying to replicate the music box but keep failing and failing. Udila is then called into a meeting with Andreas, who then not only explains that he considers throwing in a towel on the whole box, but she asks that she go into the basement and look at the core despite Udila not wanting to. A heron breaks out and the chapter ends with Udila waking up from this flashback. This chapter was really good. It serves as a nice status quo change, and I really like the conversation between Amara and Lily, with Amara going against the indoctrination instilled upon her by her parents. The flashback, however, could have been a little shorter, so that does take off some points. Either way, chapter 15 gets a 9 out of 10. Oh god, it's one of those chapters. Yeah, I'm really not a fan of body swap chapters, and this one isn't really bad per se, but it's unremarkable. If you've seen or read body swap stuff in fiction, you probably get the gist by now. There are some, however, interesting tidbits. Firstly, Luz finally explains to Udila how she got to Amphibia in the first place via the Calamity box. Udila feigns ignorance about not knowing about the box 100%, but assures Luz that she'll figure out something, as well as telling Luz that the box is probably the source of Luz's magic, and while she agrees that Luz's friends are probably here too, their biggest priority is getting the box back. One average body swap chapter later with Amara switching bodies of Luz, and at the end of the chapter we have a rather sweet moment between Luz and Amara in which they describe their goals and feelings, such as Luz wanting to be a witch even though magic doesn't exist in her world, but now that magic exists here, she can fulfill that dream with even a hug too. Then we end with Udila spiraling over what to tell Luz, that if one of Luz's friends is in Utopia, that means Andreas is aware of the box, and thus if he finds out, they are both good as screwed. In fact, not just both, all of them. This chapter, judging by the fact I gave such a brief summary, was unremarkable. The beginning and ending of the chapter was nice, but yeah, that's about it. Either way, it gets a score of 7 out of 10. This chapter begins with Luz reading Good Witch Azura as the students have a day off. Luz and Lily notice that Gustav and Amara have been absent since breakfast. As it turns out, however, they were playing music in another room. Amara and Gustav were surprised when Luz and Lily applauded them when they finished. After some chat about how they got up to this point, Gustav explains that the music was from an opera called Opera of the Frog Knight, before Luz suggests that she read Azura to them. Once they agree, Luz reads the entire damn thing until sunset. Once she was done, the group decided they'll do it a torpe, I cannot pronounce for shit in this video, based on the Good Witch Azura. Luz brings up when she auditioned for Romeo and Juliet, which went about as well as it did in canon.
Oh, happy dagger, give me death!
Cue a rehearsal montage and soapboxing about race and casting before we cut to the show itself. It was well received, with all the frogs in the area really liking it. Following the show, we cut to a group enjoying the after party at home. Udila brings them cider, underage drinking, yeah! Before Amara explains that she never hung out with any friends as her parents were incredibly strict. She was educated by private tutors, only allowed to hang with newts from quote-unquote approved families that likely didn't even care about her in the first place. Gustav relates, stating that because his interest didn't center around fighting, he was ostracized from all other toads. The chapter then ends with Luz relating with Mara about being pressured to be normal, followed by a group hug. This chapter was very short but sweet. I especially loved the parts where Amara touched up on her background, and overall the vibes in this chapter was great. A nice chapter that earns a score of 9 out of 10. The chapter starts off with Udila teaching her students an invisibility potion with Luz testing out to see if it works. Lo and behold, it does! After bottling up and calling it a day, Luz and the students get a visit from Valeriana. Now, it should be noted that Valeriana, whilst taking the role of Lilith in this fanfiction, is not an alternate counterpart of Lilith. She doesn't have an alternative counterpart in this fanfiction to begin with. Anyway, the reason why Valeriana is here is because the bizarre bazaar was taking place. Valeriana explains that she travels across Amphibia and collects random objects and artifacts. After a short discussion with Udila, Valeriana asks Luce about how she got here. Upon hearing that it was a music box, she asks Luce more about what it looked like and the whereabouts of Anne, Sasha and Marcy, though Udila was gesturing to Valeriana to feign ignorance about the box. Some more chatter later, and Valeriana scolds Udila for pressuring her to lie to Luce about the box, but also for Udila lying to Luce in the first place. Udila retorts that they don't know what could happen, either that the box is just a hoax, or that should Anne and Luce fight, it'd be so cataclysmic that it ended up causing destruction and calamity throughout the kingdom.
He said it! He said it!
When Valeriana asks if she could train Luce, Udila also says it's a bad idea, with her reason being that Luce is too impulsive. After some more discussion, we cut to an hour later when Valeriana and Udila's contact shows up. He informs them that in the mayoral election in Wartwood, Toadstool was almost beaten by a farmer, none other than Hobadiah Planter, and that his near victory could be used to help frogs rise up against the toad. They debate on whether to bring him into the resistance and spread the word before the frog informs them of a creature staying in Wartwood, that creature being Anne. However, he explains that was just rumours and he needs to go back there to confirm it for himself. More chatter later and we cut to Udila and Valeriana discussing things. Valeriana notes that Udila is worried about Anne and Luce meeting before Udila is handed a tablet by Valeriana. She reads it over and figures that it's the ingredients for the elixir of life, but however the tablet was broken and thus incomplete. Still, Valeriana recommends that she should keep hold of it just in case whilst she goes and looks for the second half. We then cut to Udila arriving back at her house and are surprised to see that Luce is still awake. Luce asks Udila if she heard any rumours about her friends. Udila lies through her teeth to Luce, but Luce buys it before we cut to a scene of Valeriana talking with Anne about the box, noting that Anne looks familiar but she forgot, and that ends chapter 18. Pretty nice chapter. I really like the dilemma that Udila has on whether she should tell Luce about the box or not. It's too early to tell as to whether I like Valeriana's chemistry with Udila or not, but it's alright for the most part. I'd say it's about as good as Lilith and Ida was in by convention. Overall, a solid chapter, 8 out of 10. Okay, so this isn't much a chapter per se, rather it's a compilation of, well, exactly as it says on the tin. There isn't really much to be said here, it's just the Plantars asking about Luce and Anne reflecting and dwelling on her and Luce's friendship to the way it ended. Now, the last part though, that's what's interesting. Whilst Anne was upselling Hot Pop's dad, she was approached by a reporter and asked by said reporter about a, quote, strange creature in Wartwood. The frog asks Anne some questions about humans, which led to Anne becoming suspicious, especially when the frog mentioned humans, asking if he knows anything about her friends here, and thus the frog attempts to make a run for it. He doesn't really get that far though, as he's tackled by Anne whilst Hot Pop calls out her name, with him, Sprig and Polly running towards it. Hot Pop pleads with the reporter to tell Anne about her friends, but the frog states he cannot for Anne and everyone else's sake. If you can't tell already, this is the same frog from the previous chapter, having been sent to Wartwood on behalf of Valeriana. After vaguely telling Hot Pop that there are people watching over him and that they're also proud of him, the frog hops away and that ends the short chapter. A pretty nice collection of stories to show what Anne's been up to that, while skippable save for the last parts, are enjoyable to read. Overall, a solid 8 out of 10. Alright, the finale of Arc 2. Let's get on with it. The chapter begins with a flashback to shortly after Luce's first day of school. Luce and Anne give a tour of each other's bedrooms via video call, with Luce mentioning that she didn't really have friends over at all, and Anne showing her cat Domino. After the video call ended, Anne noticed something about Luce that made her nicer than her other friends. Marcy was too clumsy and Sasha was too distant, but Luce just has that je ne sais quoi, you know. Anyway, then they have Luce waking up from this dream, though it wasn't really a dream per se, but rather the first time she really thought about Anne. Despite this, things were going quite well. She knows potions, she made new friends, and Amara is no longer a dipshit. Anyway, Udila calls the group downstairs, and today, she'll be taking them to the Misty Moors, hoping to encounter the Moss Man, though warns them to be wary of illusions, as the Moors can make them see stuff that isn't really there. Meanwhile, we cut to Anne tossing and turning in bed, her too having a similar dream to Luce. After reflecting on her and Luce's friendship down to its end, she gets up, gets dressed and heads out to the Misty Moors, though not before Wally warns her about the same thing Udila warned Luce about. Some stuff happens and we cut to Udila and her students arriving at the Misty Moors. She warns them not to get lost or to spook the Moss Man. At the same time, Anne arrives with Wally. Wally does a ritual to summon the Moss Man with his accordion, but Anne spots a butterfly and follows it. Wally tries to warn her, but it was too late as Anne had already wandered off. Meanwhile, as Udila and her students got deeper, it became harder to see. Suddenly, they hear a voice calling out. Luz, recognizing that it's Anne, runs towards it despite everyone's warnings. Meanwhile, Anne kept chasing after who she thought was the Moss Man, but not only did she lose it, she also lost Wally. Then she heard a voice, and that voice was Luz. As for Luz herself, she followed the voice until she ran into Anne herself, or rather, an illusion of Anne. Luz went to hug her, but the Anne illusion began scolding her for being impulsive and for the kiss at the school dance, especially since Anne wanted it to be special. Conversely, the Luz illusion reminds Anne that she ended the friendship and that she probably didn't even want to see Luz as a real friend. Then, Luz got a reminder of what happened via manifestation and what happened at the school dance. The Anne figment continued to scold her as Luz apologized profusely. After hearing Luz accept that the price of forgiveness is not being friends anymore, the Anne figment smiled and dissipated, and in its place was the Moss Man. The Moss Man was actually friendly and helped her get up before disappearing into the mist. As for Anne, she got a manifestation at the time she cut the friendship off with Luz. Anne said that she didn't mean it like that because she was worried that she may have a crush on Luz. Following this, the figure of Luz came and hugged her, except this wasn't Luz, this was, yep, the Moss Man. After wiping Anne's tears, the Moss Man ran off. Once the two got back, Luz tells Udila, Lily, Amara and Gustav about Anne, whilst Anne tells Wally about Luz, to which Udila, Lily, Amara, Gustav and Wally comfort Luz and Anne respectively, and the arc ends with Luz looking up at the sky and Anne struggling to sleep, both reflecting on when they'll find each other. This was a great chapter and ending to this arc. The way Luz and Anne handle their regrets in regards to their impulsiveness and ending the friendship was written extremely well, and I honestly feel like this is the start of the second build up to when they finally reconcile in the next arc. Plus, the ending of this chapter, where they think about each other after the experience and coming to terms with what they did, was incredibly sweet. Overall, a solid ending to Arc 2 that earns a perfect 10 out of 10. In conclusion, the second arc of The Owl and the Frog was brilliant. First, the characters. The amphibians are written really well. They're written close enough to their Owl House counterparts, yet distinct enough to where they're not just copied one to one. Amara especially is my favourite, as she goes from alpha bitch to a kind person and a proper friend to Luz. Lily and Gustav's characterization is done really well, and, like in canon, they have great chemistry with Luz. Udila is also done really well, and dare I say kinda better than Ida in some cases. Obviously can't beat the original, but sometimes a new spin is better, and I think the Red Heron is a pretty interesting take on the curse with it being done voluntarily. I also think the foreshadowing about the box is done really nicely too. As I said before, Udila's chemistry with Valeriana doesn't really have much so far, so we'll wait and see for what happens. Pacing and dialogue was fantastic, and if I had to pick a favourite, it'd be the finale, as Luz and Anne reflecting on the incident and their reactions were written amazingly. Whilst Arc 2 is not as strong as Arc 1, this still means that Arc 2 earns a final score of 8 out of 10, a really good score and really enjoyable. But even then, that still doesn't answer why I believe this is the best Amphibia fanfiction I've ever read, so stay tuned for that. Special thanks for my Patreons, your support will forever be appreciated. Join via the link in the description for special perks such as early access to videos, requests and more. Click that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all later.